Hey everyone, Jefferson here live from Indianapolis, site of the 2026 NFL Scouting Combine, and it kicked off Tuesday with the Lions GM Brad Holmes and head coach Dan Campbell both greeting the media, hitting their podiums in the Indianapolis Convention Center, which is about a mile that way. I'm directly across the street from Lucas Oil Field. I would show you the gratuitous window shot of the stadium, but it's kind of glary, and I don't really want to get up and walk over there and show you my dirty hotel room. But learned quite a few things on Tuesday. First day where pretty much anybody in the NFL was made available, and that includes the Lions, for the general media. And Brad and Dan both talked. Biggest things that we took away from it, and I wrote them down here, so we'll take them away. And one of them, they both talked a lot about Taylor Decker. And we, of course, have learned since, about half an hour after Dan was done talking, Taylor Decker posted to his social media accounts that he was coming back. And I thought that reflected well upon how Dan talked specifically about Decker and said, you know, we need to plan as if he's not going to be here, but it would be great to have him, or something like that. I'll just paraphrase. I don't have the transcripts in front of me, and I can't memorize 48 minutes worth of quotes. Sorry, I'm just not that much of a human tape recorder. But he had talked about how they need to be aware that even if Decker is back for 2026, that that they got to have a better plan B than what they've got now, which, without saying it, is not exactly a ringing endorsement of Giovanni Manu, though he was not mentioned. But it's nice to have Decker back. That gives you some stability. Hopefully he finds a way this offseason to get his pain under control, get his shoulder range back to where it needs to be, and can give us the best possible last season of Taylor Decker. And I'm assuming that he's going to retire after 2026. I don't even know that. He didn't say that. But it's nice to have Decker back. And one of the things that it does is that it alleviates the pressure on having an NFL starting ready left tackle or right tackle in the draft, which means that you don't necessarily have to look for the more polished guy. You can maybe take a little bit more of a developmental guy, whether you want to take that at 17 or at 50, or if you want to dig deeper and go down to a guy like the giant dude from Texas A&M. You can wait a little bit. If you want to wait on Isaiah World in like the 5th or 6th round for another season because he's going to be hurt, that's also an option. That probably should be still an option anyways. But that changes the dynamics with the 1st and 2nd round picks with the offensive tackles. Like Spencer Fano is generally regarded, and Francis Mauigoa, as the most NFL ready guys. I don't think either of them will be there for Detroit. But one of the things that was going to be a debate in Lions draft land was, do you take the guy who's like a B now? And I think that's what Fano is. I think he's a B tackle right now. Solid starting left tackle. Might make a Pro Bowl or two in his career. Sort of like Taylor Decker, actually. I think Decker came into the league out of Ohio State a little bit better, but you get the point. Or can you take a guy who's maybe a C as a rookie, but might be an A in 2027? Caleb Lomu falls into that range. Monroe Freeling definitely falls into that range. And instead of having to choose, now they're a lot more liberated to do whatever they want to do if they want to take an offensive lineman at all there. Does it increase the chances that they go edge with their 1st round pick? I don't know. They didn't say that. I'm not going to put words in their mouth. It certainly feels that way. But again, 1st and 2nd round still sure look like edge and offensive line, at least in my opinion. And the general consensus of pretty much everybody that's here feels that way, by the way. You can throw a safety in there, especially if Caleb Downs is in there. They did actually say, we'll use that to segue, because both Brad and Dan talked about the health of the safeties and how Dan got a lot more specific about it with Kirby, talking about how they'll know a lot more in another month. They're working on some things. They're trying to find out, exactly how good he can be, what his recovery might look like, and things like that. It honestly wasn't super promising. Branch, we know he tore his Achilles late in the season. I wouldn't expect him before the start of the season. I wouldn't expect him to be at his best any time in 2026. Would they draft a first or second round safety? And there are some to consider that we'll talk about in future episodes, but Caleb Downs is there. Caleb Downs is the best player in this draft, in my opinion. If he's there at 17, you just go. You turn that card in, go. But I don't know that they do that. But it was nice to hear some real talk about that they have considered the fact that Kirby might not be back. And if he is back, he might not be the Kirby that we have known and loved as an All-Pro and the NFL's interception leader, who was sorely, sorely missed last season. Because when he went down with the knee injury, that was the first domino to fall, and in all of the secondary things, and the entire defense just crumbled around it. They didn't really adjust very well until very late in the season. Talked about that in yesterday's daily. You can go back and watch that. It talks about the coaching staff staying intact on defense, which Dan, by the way, was super pumped up about. It was one of the first things that he brought up in his press conference, was how excited he was that there was continuity on the defensive staff. He also talked about, and I think this was important, I think this got overlooked a little bit, he spent a lot of time with Kelvin Shepherd lately, focusing on the defense. And Dan talked about how he hadn't really been able to do that. That reinforces my theory and proclamations throughout the entire season that Kelvin was a rookie coordinator swimming without any floaties on in waters that were way too deep for him as a rookie, inexperienced coordinator, because Dan had to spend so much time focusing on the offense because John Morton failed. And that did not help the defense either. And I get accused of being an apologist for Shep and for the defensive staff, and I'll take that. But I'll just remember there were a lot of circumstances that played against the defense. Could they have done better with what they had? Absolutely. Do I think they'll do better in 2026 with what they have, whether it's prime secondary or not? Absolutely. I think they're going to grow. I think discounting the fact that Kelvin Shepherd might grow, that Casey Rogers might be better in his second year than he was in his first, that a lot of these guys as a staff, with Sean Dion Hamilton coming up, and like thinking that those guys aren't going to improve, like you generally assume that players are going to improve, assume that your coaches can improve as well. Doesn't mean that they will, like, dramatically, but I think just even a little bit will help a lot. I think Dan thinks that too. And that's clearly one of the reasons why he spent so much time talking with Shep lately, and he was pumped about that. A couple of the things that came out, Brad Holmes brought up the concept of a window, and he voluntarily said those words. He said, let's call it a window. That's interesting. That is not something that I expected to hear, and I don't think many of my colleagues did either. That's Brad acknowledging that maybe he has to change course a little bit because the team has changed and the expectations have changed from where it was a couple of years ago, from 2 and 3 drafts ago, when they were able to take some risks because maybe the expectations weren't as high. And now you've got a team that has a lot of high budget players. You're paying a lot of these guys a lot of money. And that means that you can't afford to pay everybody. And that was something that Brad talked about a lot, was the fact that there's a finite budget. You don't get a separate pool for your draft and for your free agents, your internal free agents and your external free agents. They all come from the same pool. He talked about that a lot. And it relates to this. Does Brad think that the window for a championship is now? He didn't say that. I hope he thinks that. I hope he does, because I think it is. I think most people watching this think that this Lions window is open right now. Does that make him more aggressive? Does that make him more willing to chase the big Damon free agent? Although he kind of poo-pooed that, but talking about the best, being a little bit more aggressive in free agency in terms of addressing immediate need and maybe breaking character a little bit. Brad seemed more open to that. Again, he's gotten really good at the old, tool line. He had a lot to say. He had a lot of nothing to say. But you can tell that he's thinking about it. And I like that. I think that's a good step forward. We'll see if anything comes of it. I don't know. We'll see. One of the other topics that came up was David Montgomery. And this is an interesting one because every Lions staffer, coach, media from the end of the season till now has been pretty insistent that the Lions want David Montgomery back, and that the catalyst behind David Montgomery, all the rumors that are out there about him, whether they're founded or unfounded or whatever, come from him or come from the perception that he's not happy. And Brad said something, and I wrote this one down. Talking to David Montgomery's agent, said, we'd love to have him. We've had a healthy dialogue. We want to put last year in the past. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is a tacit acknowledgement from Brad Holmes that, yeah, David Montgomery isn't happy, and that maybe we are thinking about at least considering the fact that he might want out and what might we be able to get for him to get out. And that is about as much of a bombshell of an admission from Brad Holmes as you're ever going to get from a press conference like this. That really grabbed my attention. And it should have grabbed yours too, because that is an indication that the talk that's out there about Monty possibly wanting out sure as hell seems real now, doesn't it? And I was poo-pooing a little bit. I thought, he's a pro. He was frustrated at the end of the year. He'll get past it. Well, maybe he hasn't. Based on the way that Brad answered that question today, I don't know that Monty has. So there's some work to be done there. And that does change dynamics. Because if David Montgomery is gone by trade, by release, by whatever, I don't think they'd release him. I do think there would be something of a trade market for him, especially with the Jets tagging Breece Hall the way that they're going to do. That market's getting smaller. Greg Reynolds is in New England now. Jacob Sailors would be RB2. I don't think we really want to roll with that. No offense to Jacob Sailors, who looked pretty darn good last year, but I don't think he's ready to be RB2. That's a spot you got to draft or sign somebody who's not super expensive. That's not a hole. I don't want to create a hole to have to fill that same hole. Don't dig a hole that you can't fill. And I hope that Brad clings on to that, and I hope that everything does get smoothed over with Monty, because this is a much better football team with David Montgomery on it. His style blends so well with both what Jahmyr Gibbs does and what Drew Petzing and this offense want to do. So I really hope that they get that patched over. The other thing that came out, we're going to Germany, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to Munich. I do not speak German. I am of slight German heritage. I'm much more Swiss and English, but I will happily make the trip to southern Germany for Oktoberfest, which starts in September. The window for this game to be played in Germany is sometime from approximately week 4 to week 11. Yeah, that's going to be a nice time to be in Germany. Really hoping that I can wing it to get there. Make sure your passports are up to date. It will not be inexpensive to go there. I will tell you that right now. But the Lions have been very overdue to go overseas. They haven't been since 2015. They were supposed to go in 2020. They were supposed to be in London. They were supposed to be in London the week after the Browns were going to be in London. And at that point, I was covering the Browns and the Lions for USA Today. And my bosses there had agreed that I could spend the entire week in between. I was going to spend 11 days there and get to cover both games, both teams. And then COVID came and wiped them both out. And I'm still a little bitter about that, quite frankly. So I'm hopeful that I can get over there. I've never been to Europe. Would love to get to Germany and watch the Lions win in front of Amon-Ra St. Brown's faithful. You know that crowd's going to be partisan for him. Really cool. They will announce the exact date and opponent and time. Usually do those right after the draft and before mini camps. So stay tuned for that, but that's going to be cool. I'm really looking forward to it. And there's a lot of consternation right now from season ticket holders specifically. But there are 17 games. And the way that you need to think about this is that there are 8 home games, 8 road games, and there's going to be 1 neutral site game, and most of the time it's going to be international. And that is the way the NFL is going. I like the fact that they're not going to charge you as a season ticket holder or a ticket holder for 9 games when you're only going to get 8. I hope that persists. I hope that all NFL teams do that because I know a couple have not. Detroit has to this point. Let's hope they hold that. But don't get into the tizzy about, oh, we're losing a home game. It's because it's moving. Like, that's going to be the status quo going forward for all teams. You're going to have, assuming they stay at 17 games, which is probably not a great assumption, but 8 home, 8 road, 1 where you will be listed as the home team or the road team in Barcelona or Frankfurt or Rio or Sydney or Bangalore, who knows? Any number of places. The NFL is trying to get it so that it's expanded overseas, so there are games every week overseas. It's where they're going. It's where their growth market is. It makes sense. Can you squeeze much more out of the juice in America? I don't know. There's a lot of people in Europe. There's a lot of people in Africa and South America, Mexico, who seem to really like NFL football and seem to have enough disposable income to spend upon it that the NFL is interested in going there. So that's my take on that. They didn't actually talk about that. Player workouts start on Thursday. Wednesday is player interview days. We get podium times with, I think it's offensive linemen. I can't keep track. I do not get enough sleep while I'm down here. If you can't tell, apologize. I'm going to try to rest up a little bit and get things. As far as the scuttlebutt news front, really quiet day. Everything was pretty much focused on the Max Crosby talk. That John Spytek, the Raiders GM, said. I'll just go real quick on this, and I wrote about this at Real GM in my summary there. Check out footballrealgm.com. That's where my draft stuff primarily goes. My non-Lions NFL writings typically go there as well. They've been a big supporter of mine for a long time. They paid for me to come here for darn near 20 years now, and I'm very appreciative for that. But the way that it's being perceived here is that you can probably cross the Max Crosby trade dreams off, and that's not just for Detroit, not that they were valid anyways. It sure as hell sounds like he ain't going nowhere. That they believe that Fernando Mendoza can be the quarterback that can lead them to victory right away, and as Spytek said, we're not able to do that if we don't have Max Crosby on the team. And he's right. So unless Max Crosby throws a fit and demands to be out of Las Vegas, and by the way, he's never done that. He's never done that. He has the Raiders logo tattooed on his body in 2 different places. That's going to be a tough sell to get him out of there, unless they're just an absolute joke. And it feels like they are trying to convince him and everyone around him that they're going to win. Is that delusional? I don't know. A lot of people didn't think that the Lions were going to win in 2022 either. Turned into being a pretty competitive team in Dan Campbell's second year. Since then, we've been great. This last year was a bit of a hiccup, but we'll be back. Very confident we'll be back. More to the point, the Lions are very confident they will be back. That was something that both Brad and Dan expressed today in their press conferences here in Indianapolis. We will call it on that. If I get any good information, the Lions are, definitively looking at this player or this prospect in free agency, whatever, I will try to do a short on that. Other than that, this is a massively long day for me personally on the work front. It has begun probably about 7 a.m. It won't end until well after 10 p.m. So the daily for Thursday will probably be a little more focused on like the general NFL because that's sort of the way that my day will go. But we'll keep our eyes open for anything Lions related as well. If you have any questions or comments or anything, put them in the Spotify comments. If you listen on Spotify, be part of the Spotify family. That's where I tend to listen to my podcasts, not just the DLP, but other ones as well. Go into the Patreon Slack, leave them in there. Hit me on the socials. As you can see, I'm at Jeff Risden on X. I am at Jeff Riz, JRiz19 on Blue Sky, and I do check that most of the time. I also have my writings and work collection page on Facebook at Jeff Risden /Lions NFL. And you can put things in there. Everything that I do winds up getting posted there as well. You can check it out. Thank you for checking this one out. I do appreciate it. And with that, Jeff Risden signing out. Be good to one another, everybody.